This is Nina Lockwood. Welcome to Get Your Happy Back. Stories and insights that will inspire you to find new sources of happiness in your own life. Hello and welcome to Get Your Happy Back. And today I get to talk with Kristy Mandour. Hi, Kristy.
Hi, Nina.
So good to have you here. So this is, again, we take a slight left turn talking about happiness. And although happiness is innate and there are things that we can do to allow our happiness to be seen, heard, and felt by others. And what's so great about having Kristy on the call today is that she is a seasoned communications and public speaking coach and keynote speaker. So Kristy, I'm going to turn it over to you to talk a little bit more about what you do, what your backstory is, and what your mission is.
Well, first, I want to thank you for having me on and for our wonderful conversation pre-recording. We could have talked all day. We had to put a hard stop to it. We need to let other people in on this conversation. That's the benefit of being a speaker, and the challenge of being a speaker is you can just chat all day with people who you love. But yeah, I am, you pretty much nailed it. I'm a communication and public speaking coach. I absolutely am so passionate about reframing the way that we look at public speaking. I feel that it's not shocking to everybody that it's one of the greatest fears, if not the greatest fear of our many, many humans. And I love reframing it because it works. So I use a lot of my background in the performing arts to bring in the art side while also bringing in some science, because a lot of what goes past people's minds when it comes to speaking is what's happening internally. How are they speaking to themselves, in their mindset, and also in their body? So we can get further into that for sure. But where I'm passionate and what my mission is to really help people find and uncover their authentic voice, specifically leaders. And when I say leaders, it's mainly mid-level managers and up in organizations who are purpose-driven, who are passionate, who may just not know how to yet articulate their authentic leadership voice, as well as entrepreneurs.
Nice. And what I liked about part of the bio that you sent me was how you phrased it of rehumanizing the workforce. Because, right, leadership has a voice. And I'd love you to talk about the kinds of things that get in the way of people really being able to speak as if they're talking to one person.
Well, the long and short of that answer, Nina, is we get in the way.
Not us.
We get in our own way so often. There's a wonderful U2 song called Get Out of Your Own Way that I listen to frequently when I have to remind myself that. It's a great tune. But, we get in our own way. And to go back a little bit, the rehumanizing the workforce has always been at the beginning of So to Speak. So to Speak started 8 years ago.
Hold on, talk about what is So to Speak for those who don't know.
Yeah, so thank you. So to Speak is the company that I started, SOW to Speak. It started from a marketing workshop that I ran at a local incubator, like a smaller scale WeWork for entrepreneurs. How can they market their brand voice also while showing themselves as the human behind the brand, where everything aligns, right? So you're not feeling like it's a tight package. You're not feeling like there are many different stories being told, and you're confused by what does this product, this service really stand for. So then it just evolved, as many businesses do. And I started doing team building workshops, and I realized it was a bigger message than just branding and marketing. And the rehumanizing piece of that before, I'm going a little backwards with my story, but, we'll get to what gets in the way. We'll pin that for a minute if we could, because the rehumanizing side really started years before I started So to Speak. I was working as a director of programs at a local women's employment and resource center, a nonprofit organization, helping women transition back into the workforce. And there it was a spectrum of women who were divorced, separated, widowed, women who were recently released from jail, women who were recently released from rehab. And we're trying to just shift in there's so many tentacles, for lack of a better term, involved in this. It's so systemic. We know that. But I realized that it wasn't just about transitioning them back into work. It was about uncovering their voice that has been stifled for decades, for their entire life, generational trauma, all of that. And when these women started listening internally and also feeling a sense of connection and community, I realized it was rehumanizing them. They were realizing that the people in front of them who came from all different backgrounds, who were different ages, different races, different socioeconomic, they started seeing each other as people, and it was incredibly powerful. And there was one woman who had hard knock life for sure, and she had gone on a job interview. She hadn't gone on one for years, if at all, to be honest, looking back. And she prepped for it. She came back. I said, how did it go? She goes, I was more prepared than they were. And I started laughing, but then it made me think, I need to get into the organizations. I need to move up where the decision makers are and bring this to them so that it then ripples down. They rehumanize their organization with the CEOs and the presidents and the C-suites and the SVPs. They rehumanize with the managers and the individual contributors so that when they do start bringing more people in, it's a cultural shift. It's literally a paradigm shift.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the big piece of the rehumanize, because I realized so many of us are asleep in many different ways. But when it comes to work, it really is, we hear oftentimes the ripple effect, but it really does impact our entire community and then beyond. Because you have people who go to work, they spend the majority of their time there, no matter what they're doing. They come home. Many are parents. So say that they're parents, the way they feel will then ripple out to their kids. So if they're super stressed, their kids are going to be stressed. Their kids then go to school. So then their education, our future leaders, these kids, is totally impacted. The teachers aren't able to teach it. But if you start at the top and you start bringing these practices that go way beyond public speaking and communication coaching, it's a much more holistic experience, the coaching. You know that.
That's so great. I'm really glad that you brought that up. It reminds me of a quote that I found by Chip Conley, who ran a boutique hotel for 20 years, and then he became part of the senior board for Airbnb. And I thought this quote was really useful because I was doing a presentation for the Chamber of Commerce. And what he said was the most unrecognized asset of any business is its people. So what you're saying about rehumanizing and bringing our recognition of our humanity into our everyday, where we spend most of our time, I think it's just fabulous, because whether we're worried about the pressure to perform, or time management, or the pressure to be something rather than just being able to express what we know and our skills and our talents. You're right. We do get in our own way. And to be able to start from the top down, I just love that idea, because it's so important, and it's still pretty undervalued. So what you're doing is fabulous.
Well, thank you. And it takes, I really mean this, like it takes everybody to buy into it to really make the change. And what you
Absolutely.
just said about the Chip Connolly quote reminds me too, it is undervalued, the way we look at people who are part of an organization. And at the same time, I feel like people feel oftentimes that leaders specifically who want to have thriving businesses, they feel it's either we are compassionate or we're competitive. We can't have both. We can't be compassionate to the people and bring in the profit that we want to bring in and make the difference in the world that we want to make, or just bring in the profit that we want. We can't have both. And I like to bring in the yes and piece, which is very, very popular, specifically within the improv world. But
Right.
it's basically saying yes and. I mean, literally yes and. Yes, you can have that competitive edge and have compassion for the people. And in fact, there are so many studies that show when you do show that gratitude and that compassion for the people who are a part of making this happen, whatever the movement is, whatever the product or service is, you actually thrive as a company because they feel more valued. They realize that they're appreciated, they're motivated. And I don't need to tell anybody listening in that, retaining and putting that work in costs a lot less than going out and rehiring all the people who leave because they're miserable.
Yes. So true. It's,
Mhm.
on one level, we don't need all of the research to prove this. We know this because we know what makes relationships work and we know what doesn't. So to say, hey, wait a minute, let's add this component into the place where we spend most of our day. Duh, of course you would do that.
Well, to us, but you'd be surprised how many people who are very goal oriented and want to
Yes.
achieve and accomplish, they have blinders up. And some people who I've met through having the good fortune of coaching, a lot of them don't mean to be so blinders up. It's just how they are. It's
Yeah.
just where they're at. It's what gave them that edge in their career trajectory to be ambitious and to get things done. And slowing, I would say, giving them an option to choose to slow down can be terrifying. So, to go back to your original question of what gets in the way of us speaking like we're speaking to one person, there are a few pieces to that, but one is it's incredibly intimate. And if you're not feeling safe in your body to slow down, you're good luck. I mean, you're not going to be able to truly connect with one person at a time, have those real, and I'm not saying heart to heart conversations. I'm saying those conversations that when I say intimate, what I mean is where you're with one person, could be a direct report, it could be a direct supervisor, it could be a colleague, and you're having a conversation where you really understand how difficult it is for you to bring up this topic about work. Or even if you've noticed that they have been off their game lately and it would be so much easier to just ignore it. And oftentimes, when you have those crucial conversations, internally that it's right, quote unquote, because internally you can feel it, because it's usually the harder choice. So I work with people oftentimes on viewing public speaking as even in those situations that you're public speaking, you're speaking to someone else. How can you communicate in a way where you're showing up to have this conversation for them? And when they look at it in this space of, I'm here for them, the energy in their system shifts. They feel safer. We're meant to contribute. We're meant to be of service. That's how we're wired in that sense of belonging, right? And their anxiety level eases. So we work a lot on that internal shift, whether it's speaking one-on-one, whether it's doing a keynote, whether it's presenting to the board, whether it's, doing a video on social. I mean, all of this is really putting ourselves out there in a way. I consider all of that public speaking, not just the traditional behind a lectern on
Yeah,
a
that
stage.
that makes so much sense. It really seems like, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it really seems like what you're introducing is the concept of from me to we.
That's beautifully said. Exactly.
And I totally also agree that the, especially with women who are type A personalities who are always have had to work really hard and push, 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 push to get to where they want to go in their career. They, that quality of inclusion, if you will, it's kind of an extrapolation of the way we use that word these days, but that kind of, it's got to be us rather than only me, me, me. It's threatening to people who are in those positions of responsibility and leadership because they think, what if I give my, if I'm giving something away rather than realizing I'm getting so much back by including others and listening to others' opinions and new ideas and new perspectives where they may have blinders on.
Yeah, and the blind, it's so true. I love the me to we. It reminds me of the phrase, I illness begins with I, wellness begins with we.
Ah, that's great.
Same type of idea. And the blinders are many different things. Sometimes it's defense mechanisms that we don't even realize we have up. And oftentimes it is, because the more we open our blinders, literally, if you think of like turning blinds, the more light comes in. And if we're not used to it, we could be really overwhelmed. But as I recently was reminded, when we turn a light on in a room and then we turn another lamp on, it doesn't get darker, it gets brighter. So, it's like when you're with someone who you might feel a little threatened by or competitive with, remember we're socialized, specifically as females. Remember that you're caught. I mean, if you have any rebellious spirits who listen in on this and you're talking about how to be happy,
I hope so.
competitive, as they say, competition's the thief of joy, comparison's the thief of joy. So it's this idea of a few things is I like to consistently look at it as it's all information and it's a signal. So the minute I am sitting here and I'm looking at all of, say I was a visual artist and I'm seeing all these beautiful pieces of art that Nina has behind her. And I say to myself internally, like, oh my gosh, oh, she's doing, well, that one's not that great. Like, to make myself feel better because I haven't painted as much as I wanted to paint, or I feel threatened by you. Instead of feeling like, oh my gosh, if I'm totally honest, Nina is so prolific. I'm feeling a little threatened by that. And instead, I'm going to, oh, that's a signal to be inspired. What is this telling me that I want? And it takes practice and it takes slowing down. You can't do it fast. It's just not how it goes. And I'm speaking from experience. I'm high functioning anxious. I run that way. And it took a ton of work. I want to say it was a full year that I spent over the last few years of knowing what it felt like to feel safe in my body and realizing how terrifying it was to slow down and notice all of the feelings that were and the sensations. And I'm so grateful for all of the work that I've done on intuition and embodied self-awareness of just noticing internally. Embodied self-awareness is the sensations we physically feel versus the cognitive self-awareness that we're all so used to, which is what do I like? What do I not like? What type of morning person, night person, strengths, weaknesses, super important to understand. Embodied self-awareness is more, oh, I'm noticing my throat's getting tighter when Nina just asked me that question. Because the more you notice it, you can then do something about it. But if you're not safe in your body, it's going to take you down. You're going to feel like, oh my gosh, my throat's closing and now my whole body's shrinking, instead of, oh, I actually have more control over opening that up. And I work with people a lot on when that does happen, instead of going into a shame spiral. Or especially if we were going on a little bit of a tangent here, but like, especially if someone's speaking up in a meeting and they're not used to, because let's be honest, the majority of these meetings for leaders of organizations, executive leadership teams are predominantly men, predominantly white men still. And so if a woman's in there or a minority of any sort, and they're used to not speaking up and they speak up, that's a huge public speaking moment. It's huge.
Mm-hmm.
And so I say, get used to your throat starting to close. Just know that is just familiar. Let's stop making it so big and like, oh, it's just familiar. It's just what your body has been doing. And let's just make it a bit more objective and not as attached, and just go, this is just familiar. It's used to. So that part of me, I'm going to go, you know what, hon, I got you. And I talk to them about what can they do. We practice ahead of time, opening up their chest, putting both feet on the floor, putting their hands on the table, almost like you're holding potato chips, just loose, so that you can get used to that. And we'll practice that in sessions so that they can start getting used to what it feels like opening at the end of the day, opening up and grounding versus constricting their bodies.
That is so helpful.
I feel like I ran off a
No,
different
no,
direction.
no,
Sorry.
it was fine. I think that it's useful to be giving those specific examples because, as you say, a lot of us freak out when we start to feel some sensation in our body that is scary to us.
Yes.
Or we have come up with a story about what it means to have that sensation, when actually, as you say, it's a familiar habit, but it doesn't have to mean anything. It just means, okay, there it is. And as I think you so rightly point out, the more we notice, the less these things can come up and grab us in the butt and throw us down because we're just becoming more aware. And of course, we know that the key to everything is self-awareness.
It is. And it's funny because we do know that. Yeah. Oftentimes the things we know are the most difficult to practice
Of course.
consistently. So that's why I say like start small. I want to give your listeners a few like I love applying. So if I can give them like just a few things that they can take away to apply versus
Yeah.
keeping it so big. One of them I already shared was like the grounding. You and I have talked about too. I'm a huge, huge proponent of like going out in the grass barefoot. If anybody, you just need a patch of grass. You don't need anything crazy. Even if you're going to a job interview or you're about to present to a client or the board or hold a meeting for the first time as a leader or whatever it is, get to wherever you need to go a few minutes early. If there's land around there, take your shoes off. Who cares? And put your feet in the grass, because what that does is it brings your attention back into your body and out of your head. So it's kind of like cold water to the face. It kind of snaps you out of whatever's going on in your mind. Oh, I hope I don't mess up. What's going on? And it reminds you to just take a breath. Putting your hand on your heart is another one that helps. If you do it simultaneously, you will notice that you feel your body ground down. Mm-hmm. Now, the reason we prep with the getting safe in our body is because if you're not used to that and you ground down in the grass or otherwise, and you put your hand on your heart, it might be counterproductive and you might freak out because it's so not the norm of what's happening. So the more you can practice it, I always say in low stakes situations, when you are, we all go to the grocery store. So before you get out of the car to go to the grocery store, just notice, excuse me, what's going on? Am I feeling what? And I would even say, there's been research on talking to ourselves in the second and third person. It creates, again, that notice space, that mind sight, as Dr. Dan Siegel speaks on, that idea of just giving us a little bit more of a removed connection. We're still connected to ourselves, but we're not so I.
Not so identified.
Exactly. And so this idea of just, how you doing? Keep it super simple. I always say, give yourself a kiss, KISS, keep it super simple. And it's that way of giving yourself self-compassion. Traffic lights, I say to everybody, traffic lights are built-in timers. So instead of gunning it through the yellow, like so many of us do, we don't even know why we're doing it. Sometimes we just do it out of habit. Have the yellow light be a signal to catch the red light so that you can slow down and you can check in. You just notice, oh my gosh, I'm listening to these ads from this radio station. How was I? Or the news is still on. I didn't even oh my gosh. And then maybe you just turn off the radio. I still listen to the radio. I do like listening to I feel like so many people listen to podcasts and playlists, and I have those too. But I do listen to the radio once in a while for like the surprise element of what song's going to come on. So I say, you might be surprised, and then you shut off and it's quiet and you're like, that's all I needed for my system to shift. Yeah. Or maybe you were about to go to the cafe to get a coffee and you realize, oh my God, I need no more coffee. And your system's like, thank you so much. I couldn't take any more caffeine. So it doesn't have to be big. I always say start really micro small, because you're strengthening the same muscle to notice when you're in the higher stakes situations of answering a question on a podcast, pitching to an ideal client, sitting across the table from 3 board members and proposing an idea, whatever it is, right? And you're able to strengthen the same muscle of noticing that.
Can I just jump in for a second?
Sure, of course.
I want to go back to what you were talking about of noticing and being more self-aware. And that is that there is, I think we forget how easily our senses can be overloaded and overwhelmed. Because just think about it. During the day, you hear so many beeps and alarms and noises coming from electronic devices. And then if you're in a workspace, you have people talking. You have all the other sounds that happen while you're in an office. And if you're in a car, and most of us have Sirius XM or something, so we have something coming in all the time. And then if you have that moment where you turn it off and there's silence, it's like, holy smokes, yes, I needed this, that we don't regulate ourselves in terms of sensory overload, and how that is really important to being able to collect ourselves before we talk to somebody, whether it's our boss, a colleague, someone who we're managing, any of those things. If we're on overdrive and our senses are trying to say to us, just take a minute, slow down here, take a breath. If we don't honor that, how can we be present? How can we go from me to we? Because then it's all about us and just continuing that overdrive.
It's so true. It's such a good point. And I'll even piggyback on and say it's almost all about nobody at that point. It's not about you. It's not about we. Like, no, we don't even know what we're about at that point, because we're just, there's no intent. And you don't have to get super, you and I've talked about like how spirituality and how personal development can get like so hoity-toity. Like, it doesn't have to get like that. It can, that's why I say just break it down so simple. Keep it super simple. You know yourself. The benefit of slowing down is that you can internally notice what you need. And a lot of times we don't do it because it's super inconvenient. Oftentimes we hear something and it's like, oh, but I don't want to have that conversation, or I don't want to leave that job, or I don't want to have to make that move in my business, or whatever it is. And you don't have to, really. People often get nervous about their intuition. Like, that means I have to do that right now. It's like, it doesn't. It's just you strengthening, noticing it, and it will get louder if it's necessary. But just remember, it's just you noticing. And to your point about shutting off the noise, for some people, that isn't helpful. So I share that as an example. Like, sometimes it's just noticing. And if you're someone who's like, the car's great because you can practice and experiment and explore alone. So you might be like, you know what? Yeah, I'm going to shut off the radio or the whatever's playing. Other times you might say, I just don't like this. I want to put on a song that's going to get me excited. Yes. Or I want to put on a song that's nostalgic, because to go from 100 to 0 or vice versa is too much for our systems. So you're not doing it wrong. If like putting no sound on is incredibly overwhelming to you, it just is. Do something that's going to just allow you to feel a bit more aware about what you need in that moment. That's it.
Yeah. Great.
Right. And the last piece that I'll add on, when you were speaking about, prepping before we speak to a colleague or a group of people, a lot of times as people advance in their career, they feel that they should know how to do it. So they're like, I've been doing this for 20 years. I don't need to. And I call BS on that, because it is total mutual respect to be able to say to yourself, even if it's not for you, if it's an ego thing, to say, you know what, out of respect for this person, I'm going to just make sure I have all my ducks in a row. I'm going to make sure that I clearly know what I want out of this conversation, or what I want them to receive out of this conversation. Or if it's a presentation, I want to get really clear on, did I really put my empathy hat on and like put myself in their perspective of like, what would they really want from this presentation? What would make them feel really like that was worth my time. And you might be able to do it in less time as you become more seasoned, but to give no prep at all is in its own way, it's like a disrespect,
And it's disrespectful to yourself.
Tell me more about that, because I have my own thoughts, but I would love your perspective on that.
For me, it goes back to the connection that we all have. I mean, we all share our beingness, so to speak. We're all in this together. And I, for my own growth and my own awareness, to be for me, in terms of speaking to somebody else, I want that connection. I want that heart to heart connection, even if I'm crunching numbers, even if I'm doing something that doesn't seem touchy feeling, we're still in it together. It's you and I, and those moments of connection are when we can really hear each other. So why would I do it to myself? Because I value efficiency more than connection. So
Mm.
that's what I was thinking. So your turn.
Oh my gosh, 100%. And you worded that so articulate, because yes, so often we do look at people as like a check mark on a to go, like a to-do list. We don't mean to. Many people don't mean to, really, because I've had conversations with incredibly ambitious, high functioning anxiety leaders who are incredibly humbled when we slow down, and I tell them, do you know how much courage it takes to say that you actually were looking at this as like a task? Like you looked at this human as a task in human form, and they were just in, part of the checkoff list. It takes so much courage to admit that, because that's when you can start humanizing them. It is so much easier to go to deflect it, or to go, no, I wasn't, or it wasn't a big deal. But to actually cringe, I often say it's part of the deal that we have to gross ourselves out to grow. We have to have that cringe moment of like, oh, I can't believe I said that, or I can't. And for some people, it's like, I can't believe I didn't speak up. Oh my gosh. But it's those parts of ourselves that also need our love. So
Mm.
part of the process of the 3-month public speaking program that I run, the first piece that we do is an assessment on emotional intelligence and energetics, so that you can understand, like, where do situations pop up, where we go through 7 different levels of emotion, like where do I feel this stuff, so that you can start prepping yourself, which goes to your point of respecting yourself, right? And respecting the other person. The coolest thing about this is I always share, everything you're doing, quote unquote, for yourself is simultaneously strengthening your capacity to connect and respect other people. It's so cool. So to your point about the efficiency piece, it's a yes and, right? You're being efficient and you're becoming more connective with yourself and others.
Right.
And then we go into getting really clear on core values in a way that isn't like a checkoff list. It's an embodied self-awareness. I have them walk through like embodying what matters to them, so they can bring those not just into the conversation or into the presentation, but then it gives you a window into, what does this person care about? What do these people, if I guessed what they valued, and then you can have the conversation or the presentation really geared towards that. And it's an unsaid respect that can be felt. It can be felt. And then, the idea of getting really clear on where would I like to strengthen my communication impact as a leader goes back to that grossing ourselves out to grow. Because then at that point, that's why we do those layers like that, because at that point, they feel so much more settled in and self-aware. They feel safe enough with me, because we've built trust now, and with themselves, most importantly, to really go, I'm going to call BS on myself. Like, it wasn't my finest moment. I've had so many people say, to your point, oh my gosh, I just got promoted and I actually feel threatened by my direct reports now. And I want them to feel empowered, but I feel myself feeling overwhelmed with all the stuff I'm doing, because I'm scared of delegating to them. Because what if they do really well? And there's this, and I would say, do you know how much courage it takes to say that out loud? Now we can get to work. Now you can speak to them with a stronger, clearer, more confident voice, because we're going to dismantle that idea, because just like we said before, you turn a light on in a room, you turn their light on, it's just going to get brighter. It's not going to dim.
So it's so smart what you're saying. And, you know, for any teacher, any person in a position of leadership, they actually, their goal is to help the person that they're working with transcend what they have to give. So the greatest gift a spiritual teacher can give their student is that they no longer need them because they've been able to take what that teacher is pointing to and recognize what they need and then say, okay, great. Thank you. That's exactly what I needed. And then go off on their own. So it's an interesting dilemma to be in, to be afraid that your direct reports are going to supersede you because you kind of want that. Because that's your job, to make them as good as they can be, as well as make yourself, it's going back to the me to we again, because by helping them grow, you grow.
Well, yes. And I will go back to you saying like self-awareness is key. When you say that's their job, it's great. It's great to think that on the surface. And that's where we go underneath, because even if they're like, well, I want them to succeed. Well, there's a bit of a gap between your actions and what you're saying. So that's when we get into the mindset. That's when we get into my number one thing is to be like, you're not a horrible person for admitting this. Like, let's just call a spade a spade.
Let's be human.
Super human. And the vast majority of leaders who are not, even the ones who call themselves servant leaderships, like leaders, it's human to feel that survival of the fittest, like it's built into our DNA.
Yeah, our socialization.
A social, I mean, there's so many tentacles again. Like it's so much that I say, this is so not your fault. So let's take blame out of the situation and say that you're actually just in that second of you acknowledging what you're doing behind what you're saying, you're a better leader. We could be at 5 minutes in on a session. And I would say, if you had to leave right now, you would walk out that door a better leader. And you'd feel uncomfortable and you'd feel, a layers off. So it's a little raw. All that's super normal. Your ego's going to start firing up and telling you all expect all of that. Expect to feel like, what the hell is going on? Because that's part of the practice of internally differentiating between your intuition and your ego.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's big stuff.
It's the best. Really is. When you think about it, it goes back to self-awareness and wanting to be the best you can, to deliver your best. And every time you deliver your best, you see there's another opportunity to grow even more, to expand even more. And don't you think that's what people want? They want to keep seeing that the world is wider and wider rather than narrower and narrower.
If you're literally asking me that question, this is my practical sense. I feel some people want that. I hope my optimistic side is I hope more and more people want that. And I do feel more and more people want that. And I feel some people don't, for whatever reason, whether it's intentional or just, again, their shades are drawn and they're internally asleep. Yeah. And it might not be their karma this time around. Yeah. To wake up, that's part of it too. Yeah. But my goal, just like yours from us speaking so frequently, is it's really to the people who are a little interested, who are just leaning in a little bit more, who kind of get it and maybe are kind of nervous, but they get it. Those are the people who are the clients I work with.
Yeah.
And they're the ones who do want to be the best. And at the same time, I lean away from using that language with them because they tend to be very perfectionistic. Right. And they are usually family people. So they are like, it's either or. Either I'm a great parent and or a great spouse or a great leader, but I can't be all of it. And then I feel like crap about myself. So we work on shifting that perspective. And when they come in and they go, don't I want to live my best life? I'm like, you are talking to the wrong coach for that, because
I
I want
know.
you to live your whole life.
Yes.
WHOLE. Our goal is to move from whole, HOLE, to WHOLE. And that is authentic, and it's not always your best. And it's giving yourself love when you're not showing up as your best, quote unquote, but you're showing up as the most whole, genuine person that you could be.
I love that. I love that whole to whole. And when you think about it, as you were describing what you were just describing, I was thinking about kids. Most kids are just, let me at it, let me at life, right? Let me just try this. I fearless, just, doing anything and not worrying about it until they get older and they get indoctrinated to be concerned about one thing or another. But I think that's what I'm referring to when I talk about best. It's really more about possibility and being
Mm,
open to possibility. And yes, many of us get closed down and suspicious about what that could mean as adults. And yet, there's nothing like that feeling of what else is possible? What's next? And yes, some people can't go there because whatever has happened to them that precludes that choice. But wow, when you can go from whole, like the donut, to whole, like me to we, nothing better than that.
so true.
So as we come to a close, which I'm sorry about, but we'll do it again. Tell us where people can reach you and if you have any last bits of wisdom that you can share with us.
Sure. So everybody can go to, those who are interested, to the So to Speak podcast. It is on Spotify, it's on Apple. I'll give you the link too that you can share, and all the info of, programs and offerings. If anybody's interested in the public speaking 3-month coaching offer, if anybody's interested to follow on LinkedIn or Instagram, all of that is in the podcast show notes. So the best thing about the podcast is that it's short and sweet. You and I spoke about that. I really lean into the idea of, this is the about this podcast and also words of wisdom. So I'm being efficient with this. The number one thing I consistently do in every single aspect of my business and I work with clients on is create what you'd want to consume. So I create the podcast as if, and if I hear it and I'm like, I don't buy what I'm saying, or that's not, no, then it's out. Walter agrees. You hear him barking? He
I
agrees.
did.
It works though within leadership. Create what you want to consume. Do you want to consume that communication from somebody? Would you want to consume that? Would you want to consume that culture, that environment? If you're a leader, a huge part of the responsibility, and it's not shame, blame, guilt, it's being able to respond to the environment so you can create what you want to consume.
Love that. I'm ready to go for the rest of the day on this conversation.
Me too.
So, thank you again for joining me today. And for those of you who are listening, thank you also. And we will see you on the next episode. So, bye for now.